In recent days, the tragic story of women being brutally assaulted and murdered, whether it is the rape and killing of Dr. Momita Debnath, a gifted young physician in India, or the horrifying attack on a 14-year-old girl by her teenage neighbor here in Nigeria, or is it the gruesome murder of Christiana, a 300-level student in Nigeria as well? This illustrates the global crisis of gender-based violence. These harrowing incidents are not isolated. They are part of a pervasive pattern that cuts across cultural and geographical boundaries, exposing the deep flaws in our systems designed to protect women and girls from such egregious harm. Christiana Idowu has brought to light the deep vulnerabilities that women in Nigeria face on a daily basis. Her murder at the hands of Ayomide Adeleye, a man she thought was a friend, has sparked outrage across the country and left many questioning just how safe women are. Christiana's death was not just an isolated incident, but part of a larger trend of violence against women that permeates every corner of the society. From domestic abuse to kidnappings and serial killings, Nigerian women continue to live in fear of a system that has not done enough to protect them. Christiana Idowu was a 300-level student at the Federal University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, FUNAB, with a bright future ahead of her. On the surface, she was just like every other young woman, full of potential and ambition. However, her story took a dark turn when she was kidnapped by someone she knew and trusted. Her family, desperate to bring her back, paid a ransom to her abductors, but it was all for nothing. Her body was found days later and her death shocked the nation. What makes this story even more harrowing is the revelation that Ayomide Adeleye, her killer, had a history of violence against women. Reports indicate that Adeleye, a 23-year-old student at Olabisi Onabanjo University, OOU, had been involved in the deaths of at least 2 other women, including his sister and girlfriend. This pattern of behavior paints a grim picture of how easy it is for men with violence tendencies to act without impunity and how little protection women have from predators. Unfortunately, Christiana's story is not an anomaly. It is a painful reminder of the dangers women face in Nigeria, a country where gender-based violence is widespread and deeply entrenched. According to data from the United Nations, 1 in 3 Nigerian women has experienced physical or sexual violence in their lifetime, with much of this violence being perpetrated by intimate partners or acquaintances. The fact that Christiana was killed by someone she knew and trusted only underscores the prevalence of such violence in the country. The lack of effective legal protections exacerbates the situation. Despite the enactment of the Violence Against Persons Prohibition VAPP Act in 2015, which was designed to address issues of domestic violence, rape and harmful traditional practices, implementation has been weak and enforcement even weaker. Women, especially in rural areas, are often left without recourse or support, while predators of violence are rarely held accountable. Violence against women in Nigeria is not just a legal issue, it is also a deeply cultural one. Patriarchal norms and values continue to place women in subordinate positions, normalizing their mistreatment and marginalization. In many communities, women who speak against violence are often blamed for their own suffering, accused of provoking their attackers, or ostracized by society. This culture of silence and victim blaming discourages women from reporting incidents of abuse, allowing the cycle of violence to continue unabated. Moreover, the rise of social media has highlighted just how unsafe women are, not only in public spaces, but even in their own homes. Cases of online harassment, revenge porn, and cyberbullying have skyrocketed, and the response from authorities has been largely inadequate. The reality is that for many Nigerian women, there is no safe space, and not at home, not on the streets, and not online. In the aftermath of Christiana's death, there has been an outpouring of anger and grief across social media with the hashtag Justice for Christiana trending nationwide. But while this is an important step in raising awareness, it is not enough. If we are to truly address the issue of violence against women, we must go beyond hashtags and online outrage. First and foremost, there needs to be a stronger commitment from the government to enforce existing laws and implementation of new ones that prioritize the safety and well-being of Nigeria. The VAPP Act, while a step in the right direction, needs to be enforced consistently across all states. Police and judicial systems must be trained to handle cases of violence and the seriousness they deserve, and victims need to be given the resource and support they need to escape abusive situations. Secondly, there must be a concerned effort to change societal attitude towards women. Education is key in this regard. Schools should incorporate lessons on gender equality and respect for women into their curricula, and community leaders must work to challenge the harmful traditional norms that perpetuate violence. Religious and cultural institutions, which hold significant influence in Nigerian society, must also be involved in promoting the message that violence against women is never acceptable. The tragic death of Christiana Idowu is a wake-up call for all of us. It is a stark reminder of the dangers that women face every day in Nigeria and the urgent need for action. We cannot continue to live in a society where women are not safe in their homes, in their schools, or on the streets. We must do better, not just for Christiana, but for all the women who continue to live in fear of violence. The time for change is now. As if Christiana's story was not enough, the shocking assault of a 14-year-old girl by her 15-year-old neighbor has brought to the forefront the increasing incidence of violence and sexual abuse against minors in Nigeria. This latest case in Ebonyi State, where a young girl named Mercy was violently attacked and raped by Goodluck Bison, a teenage boy, is a grim reminder of the dangerous reality that children, particularly young girls, are facing across the country. Mercy, who was struck with a pistol and sexually assaulted in her own home, is now fighting for her life due to a traumatic head injury and the psychological toll of the assault. The sheer brutality of this incident is deeply distressing and speaks to an epidemic of unchecked violence that needs to be urgently addressed. In late August 2024, Mercy, while asleep in her home, was brutally attacked by a 15-year-old boy, Goodluck Bison, who forced his way into her house. The attacker struck her with a pistol, knocking her out unconscious before raping her. The aftermath of this crime was devastating. Mercy suffered severe head injuries, particularly an acute epidural hematoma, which left her in a critical state and in need of urgent medical intervention. Her family was forced to take her to Enugu, as the local hospital in Ebonyi was unable to treat her due to ongoing strikes. Mercy's battle for survival underscores a harsh reality in Nigeria, where the healthcare system is often overwhelmed and critical medical services are difficult to access, especially in the times of crisis. Mercy's story is not unique in Nigeria. Across the country, violence against children, particularly sexual violence, has been on the rise. The Nigerian society, rife with unpatriarchal norms and the lack of law enforcement, has allowed the violence to persist. The criminal justice often involves victims either through slow or inadequate investigations, lenient sentences for perpetrators, or the stigmatization of victims themselves. This has left countless women and girls vulnerable, with many incidents going unreported out of fear or societal pressure. One of the most tragic aspects of this case is that it happened within the confines of Mercy's home, a place that should have been a sanctuary for her safety. Instead, her home became the scene of brutal attack, demonstrating that girls in Nigeria are not safe, even in their own houses. The boundaries between safe and unsafe spaces for young girls have become blurred as reports of child abuse continues to surface from schools, homes, religious centers, and even public places. The roots of this crisis can be traced back to deep-seated cultural and societal attitudes towards women and girls. In many parts of Nigeria, girls are often viewed as secondary to boys and are thus more vulnerable to violence and abuse. Traditional gender roles and stereotypes perpetuate the belief that women are inferior, leading to their devaluation in society. This cultural framework not only fuels violence against girls, but also normalizes it, creating an environment where abusers feel emboldened to act without fear or consequences. Moreover, in some communities, the victim is often blamed for the violence they experience. Girls who have been assaulted may be shamed or ostracized by their families and communities, further discouraging them from seeking justice. This culture of silence and stigmatization creates a vicious circle where perpetrators go unpunished and victims suffer in isolation. The ineffectiveness of Nigeria's law enforcement agencies in dealing with cases of child sexual violence is a significant contributing factor to this crisis. Despite the existence of laws meant to protect children from abuse, the implementation of these laws is often weak or non-existent. Police investigations into sexual assault cases are frequently delayed, poorly conducted, or ignored altogether. Victims and their families are often left to navigate a legal system that seems indifferent to their plight. In Mercy's case, the fact that her attacker was a neighbor complicates matters even further. The proximity of the perpetrator to the victim makes it difficult for families to pursue justice without fear or retribution. In many cases, victims are pressured to drop charges or settle out of court to avoid public shame or community conflict. This lack of accountability emboldens predators and reinforces a cycle of abuse. A key aspect of tackling this crisis is education and awareness. Schools, religious institutions, and community organizations must take a more proactive role in educating children about their rights and the importance of consent. Children need to be taught from a young age that their bodies belong to them and that they have the right to say no to unwanted advances or touch. Parents too must be empowered with the knowledge and tools to talk to their children about sexual abuse and how to seek help if it occurs. Moreover, the government must work to ensure that schools are safe spaces for children. Too often, sexual abuse is perpetrated by those in positions of authority, teachers, religious leaders, or community elders who exploit their power over vulnerable children. There must be strict regulations in place to protect children from abuse in schools and ensure that any perpetrators are swiftly brought to justice. Mercy's tragic story calls for urgent action. The government must take a more aggressive stance in addressing violence against children by strengthening the legal and judicial systems. This includes ensuring that cases of child abuse are prioritized, that police are properly trained to handle these cases, and that perpetrators are often accountable with strict sentences that deter future crimes. Additionally, the government must improve access to health care for victims of abuse, ensuring that they receive the physical and psychological care they need to recover. Civil society organizations and NGOs also have a critical role to play in advocating for victims and raising awareness that the crisis of child sexual violence. These organizations can help bridge the gap between the legal system and victims by providing legal aid, counseling services, and safe spaces for victims to recover and rebuild their lives. It is essential that society as a whole confronts the cultural attitudes that allow violence against women and girls to persist. The belief that girls are inferior or that their worth is tied to their sexual purity must be challenged and replaced with a culture of respect, equality, and empowerment for all children, regardless of gender. The attack on Mercy is a tragic reminder of child sexual violence in Nigeria. It is a call to action for all levels of society, government, law enforcement, civil society, and communities to do more to protect the most vulnerable against us. We cannot allow another child to suffer in silence or endure the horrors that Mercy has faced. The time for change is now. The brutal rape and murder of Dr. Momita Debnath, a 31-year-old postgraduate medical trainee at RUG Medical College in Kolkata, India, has shaken the global conscience. On the morning of August 9, 2024, Dr. Nedbat's colleague reported her missing, and later her mutilated body was discovered in a seminar hall at the hospital. The extent of the violence inflicted on her was nothing short of horrifying: bleeding from her eyes, mouth, and genitals, multiple fractures, and severe trauma to her skull. The autopsy revealed that she had been raped and strangled, with the DNA evidence pointing to a civic volunteer at the Kolkata police. This case has sparked widespread outrage, igniting protests across India and drawing international attention. Doctors, medical students, and human rights advocates have united to demand justice, not just for Dr. Debnath, but for many women who suffer silently under systematic violence and oppressions. In a country where rape and sexual assault are all too common, Dr. Debnath's death serves as a grim reminder of the deep-rooted issues that plague women's safety. Dr. Debnath's murder is not an isolated incident. It exists within the larger context of the pervasive culture of sexual violence against women, which extends beyond national boundaries. This horrifying event echoes a pattern seen in many parts of the world where institutional failures and a lack of accountability leave women vulnerable. The hospital, a place where people go to heal, became the very site of our unimaginable suffering. This incident exemplifies the gender-based violence that continues to thrive in patriarchal societies where women's safety is never guaranteed, not even in professional spaces where their intellectual and compassionate contributions are paramount. The cover-up attempts by local authorities further exacerbated public outrage. Initial claims that Dr. Debnath has committed suicide were immediately met with skepticism, given to the extent of her injuries. This effort to suppress the truth highlights the wider problem of how sexual violence cases are handled by institutions, where protecting perpetrators often takes precedence over ensuring justice for victims. Horrifying rape and murder of Momita Debnath sparks global outrage. Police accused of covering up the case of Dr. Momita Debnath has sparked an international response. Protests have erupted in countries like the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, calling for systematic reforms to address the underlying issues of sexual violence and gender injustice. Human rights organizations are demanding accountability, transparency in the investigation, and stronger protections for women, especially those in high-stress professions like medicine. This case reflects not just a failure of the individual perpetrator, but also a societal failure to protect women and ensure justice. It demands that we examine the underlying social, cultural, and institutional factors that contribute to the normalization of violence against women. From workplace safety measures to the conduct of law enforcement, every aspect of the system must be scrutinized and reformed. The murder of Dr. Debnath has left a significant impact on the medical community, which has responded with profound grief and anger. Many medical bodies, including the Indian Medical Association (IMA), have suspended elective services to protest the crime and call for reforms to better protect healthcare workers, particularly women, who are often subjected to harassment and violence in the workplace. This tragedy has also led to renewed discussions on the mental and physical well-being of healthcare professionals who work long hours under immense pressure. Furthermore, Dr. Debnat's colleague have proposed naming a lecture hall or research hall facility in her honor, ensuring that her legacy as a brilliant physician and compassionate mentor lives on. We hope that her memory will inspire future generations of doctors while simultaneously highlighting the urgent need for systematic reforms to protect healthcare workers. The murder of Dr. Momita Debnat is a heartbreaking reminder of how unsafe women remain in professional and public spaces. As protests continue and calls for justice echo across borders, it is crucial that this moment becomes a catalyst for real change. Finally, women themselves need to be empowered to protect themselves and speak out against abuse. This means providing them with access to education, economic opportunities, and healthcare, as well as creating safe spaces where they can seek help without fear of judgment or reprisal. NGOs and civil society organizations have an important role to play here, but they need more support from both the government and the private sector. My name is Chidera. See you some other time.